Indonesia has, as you know, been on this incredible growth trajectory over the last decade under the leadership of President Jokowi. It's been absolutely remarkable, and the world has been watching. At the same time, the commitment to energy transition and to a path to net zero has been very, very strong. And now, with the new president taking office in the next 10 or 12 days, it's wonderful to have this consistency in policy. And I admire that about Indonesia. Indonesia will play the leading role in energy transition. So there are a number of strategic projects across the country where Vector's often invited to come and lend expertise and investment and be involved in. Kadin has this very critical role to play, and it's a big organization, and I've seen the quality membership is actually really, really high. So with the right leadership, Kadin can do remarkable things. And frankly, I've seen Anin Bakri in action around the world for a number of years. He's very, very well respected. He's passionate about his country. He works relentlessly. He is on airplanes, on trains, on the road, all over the world, promoting the Indian opportunity and mirroring the vision of the president and the government of the day.
Masa depan elektrifikasi telah menghadapi tantangan dari ketidakpastian ekonomi global. Indonesia sendiri telah menargetkan untuk menjadi hub kendaraan listrik di pasar, dan kini pemerintah Indonesia telah mengembangkan ekosistem kendaraan listrik di Indonesia. Vector yang merupakan pelopor bus EV di Indonesia telah menerima beberapa pesanan dari badan usaha milik negara untuk memasok truk listrik pertama untuk Ibu Kota Nusantara atau IKN. Kini telah hadir bersama kita Lord Sarfraz Aamer sebagai komisaris VKTR, dan selain menjadi komisioner dari VKTR, Lord Sarfraz Aamer juga telah menjadi anggota aktif dari House of Lords di Parlemen Inggris sejak 2020 dari Partai Konservatif dan juga menjadi penasihat dari Partai Konservatif. Wawancara kali ini akan diselenggarakan dalam bahasa Inggris. Good morning, Lord. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me.
It's such an honor for you to be here with us. And now we're going to ask Lord how he sees the potential of electric vehicles from his point of view as VKTR Commissioner, and as VKTR itself is a pioneer of EV buses in Indonesia. So, from your point of view, what are the prospects of electric vehicles in the market, and both for private vehicle and public transport, and especially for the buses toward the implementation of the new government policy about the electric vehicle ecosystem?
Well, thank you. Indonesia has, as you know, been on this incredible growth trajectory over the last decade under the leadership of President Jokowi. It's been absolutely remarkable, and the world has been watching. At the same time, the commitment to energy transition and to a path to net zero has been very, very strong and pronounced. And you know, around the world, many governments, they're on and off in terms of electrification. One party is in power and they're talking about it, and the next is pulling it back. But in the case of Indonesia, it's been very, very consistent. And now, with the new president taking office in the next 10 or 12 days, it's wonderful to have this consistency in policy. And I admire that about Indonesia. In terms of Vector has come in just 2.5 years ago as a major player in this space. Very quickly had a considerable amount of market share in the industry, and the focus has been on buses and trucks so far. And like anywhere in the world, you start with fleets. And you start with fleets because the point-to-point is known of where a bus is traveling. You can have charging infrastructure there, much easier to do. And you need that public sector support from the likes of Transjakarta and others in order to get these fleets up and running. That's happening. It's been happening now for a few years. You can see buses running across Jakarta. And you know, what that means is that members of the public can benefit from day-to-day electrification. So instead of having to buy your own expensive Tesla or whatever, which is, you know, still out of reach for most consumers around the world, you don't want electric vehicles to be only accessible to a certain income class. Here in Indonesia, the public has been very accepting of electric buses, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now that the transition of the government has started, and new president and new cabinet coming in, I think there will be consistency in policy, and this is the time. The next 6 months, 9 months, year, and then 5 years will be an opportunity for Vector to really, really ramp and grow.
So, can you elaborate what kind of business activities does Vector engage in the electric vehicle market, and how is the role of Vector in supporting the electric vehicle ecosystem in Indonesia in the future to support Indonesia as the EV hub for the region?
Vector's role is to develop and deliver world-class electric buses and trucks, and in the future, across the spectrum, be tractors and heavy mobility lifters and all of those things for Indonesia, with a lot of localized content using technology from all over the world, some of it domestic, some of it from the very best places, and customize it for the Indonesian market and deliver it to businesses and consumers. And Vector is also taking a close look across the entire value chain of where there are needs and opportunities to help that value chain come up. And so, lots of people say there's not enough charging infrastructure. How do we make sure the critical minerals are there to create the batteries, which then go into these vehicles, etc. And so Vector is taking this view to ensure that all the partners are in place for a long-term sustainable supply chain for electric vehicles. And the big vision is to mirror the ambitions of the incoming president and his government, and to do that in steps that make sense and can deliver value and results for the customers who are buying this. They should be able to see the financial value as well in transitioning their own fleets to electric fleets. And so that is the sort of stuff that we're working on. The team has been exceptional about it. There's so much happening. I was just in Vector's offices. There are plants being built, there are partnerships being signed, and you hear a lot of good news coming in the next few months.
So, for the upcoming government, what are the Vector's expectations regarding the regulation of electric vehicles, especially in electric buses for the public transportation? Should the government provide incentive to accelerate the electric vehicle ecosystem, and what kind of incentive should be given and why?
Well, everywhere in the world where the EV industry has taken off, there has been government support. And it's very difficult to launch any new industry without appropriate government support in the early days particularly. And as you do it in the early days, slowly the cost of these new products starts to come down, and then those subsidies, etc., can be removed. So you need to support the battery industry for sure in building gigafactories and investing in new chemistries for batteries. Then you have to support the supply chain even further upstream. So the mining of these minerals in a sustainable way has to be done. Then these batteries have to go into vehicles that have to be locally made and assembled. That industry will need support until it's able to get off the ground. And then ultimately the buyers, the public sector has to be an early buyer. So big public sector fleet operators have to be early customers. And that's not just the case in EVs, it's the case in any technology change which you want to encourage as a country. And again, I pay tribute to the leadership of Indonesia for having consistency and clarity in thought. Many others around the world are faltering. Indonesia is staying on track to meet its net zero commitments. That's admirable, and we should all internationally support that.
Yeah. So from your point of view, in the near future, do you see Indonesia has the prospect or the ability to create the EV factory?
Yeah, but this absolutely 100%. But this is not a short-term initiative. This is something which takes years and years to do. But what we've been able to do at Vector is to deliver tangible results every few months and take those small steps that are needed to introduce these new products into the industry with the top partners in the world now. So we have some of the top partners in the world working on this. So I'm super excited about it. And if there are any markets in the world which I think in terms of size and sort of ability to transition that I'm most optimistic about, it's not most of the countries in Europe, frankly. It's this region, it's the ASEAN region, it's Southeast Asia, and within that, Indonesia will play the leading role in energy transition.
We know that IKN is aiming to become the smart city and the green city. And what role do factors play to support IKN becoming a smart and green city?
There are a number of strategic projects across the country where Vector's often invited to come and lend expertise and investment and be involved in. And so that's one of them, and there's many, many others. And I think we will evaluate all of these and see where the most need is, and frankly, where the most impact is for the populace. I mean, that's the most important thing, that you don't want just Jakarta to be running EVs and the rest of the country not to be. They're a massive country with a huge population, and so I think Vector is able to take a much more holistic look.
Okay, thank you. Now we move to Kadin, or the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So how do you evaluate the role of Kadin Indonesia to support Indonesia's government vision to reach 8% economic growth in the future?
Well, Kadin is one of the most unique chambers of commerce in the world because it has a place in law. And as a result, it's taken much more seriously than some other business organizations or chambers, networks, etc. in other countries. This has a statutory footing in law. And so Kadin will play a very important role in actually offering investable opportunities to investors from around the world, because you might be interested in Indonesia, you might want to invest, but you have no idea how to or who to do it with. You want to, go where your capital will be welcomed and you'll stay where it's going to be well treated. And Kadin will have this opportunity to present these opportunities around the world, but also prepare Indonesian businesses for global markets. Prepare Indonesian businesses for fundraising in Europe and the Middle East and the US. Prepare them for joint ventures and partnerships in these markets. Make sure they know what those partners will need. Make sure they know what the regulatory landscape is in those countries. This is not all work that Indonesian embassies and diplomatic missions can do. Kadin has this very critical role to play. And it's a big organization, and I've seen the quality membership is actually really, really high. So with the right leadership, Kadin can do remarkable things.
Okay. Now we know that Anindya Bakrias currently leads the Kadin Indonesia. And what are Anindya's strengths that can make Kadin Indonesia optimistic that Kadin will grow under his leadership?
Well, Kadin, what you need in Kadin is a global business leader who people around the world take seriously, respect, and that speaks the language of global markets, global investors. And frankly, I've seen Anindya Bakri in action around the world for a number of years. He's very, very well respected. He's passionate about his country. He works relentlessly. He is on airplanes, on trains, on the road, all over the world, promoting the Indian opportunity and mirroring the vision of the president and the government of the day. And so every investor that I've spoken to is absolutely delighted that Kadin will have such a high quality, result-oriented leader.
Thank you, Lord. And that brings us to the end of interview with Lord. Thank you for your time and for the insightful conversation. Hope everyone have a good day and see you next time.